So we are recording. All right, so this is the last career workshop in biology. And today we are joined with Ashley Rayom and Graham Lobert. And they're going to tell us a little bit about their backgrounds, and then we'll open it up for some questions. Do we have a volunteer who to go first?
I guess I can go.
Go ahead.
Okay. So my name's Graham Lobert. I'm originally from Blanchard, Michigan, so just down the street from campus. Only like, what is it, like 15 miles, something like that. Not very far away. But I graduated from CMU with a Bachelor of Science, the Ecology, Evolution, and Conservation degree in 2019. And now I'm at the University of Hawaii, where I'm a thermal physiologist, and I study the effects of temperature on the development of Antarctic invertebrates. So, been in the Antarctic once, and I'm hoping to go back in a couple months. So that's about me.
Awesome.
Hi. I have just a little slide of just some nice pictures here, so I can show that to you. Let's see, I've never used WebEx before. Can you see my screen? Great. Okay, so hi, my name's Ashley. I graduated from CMU in 2018 with a double major in biology and environmental studies. Being a first-generation college student from Michigan, being a marine biologist seemed like totally unrealistic for me. You know, marine biologists kind of sound like unicorns, but I was able to make it there from CMU, and I started off by doing my research in Dr. Mahan's lab as an undergraduate volunteer, and that gave me some skills to do a bunch of really exciting paid summer internships on the coast and, you know, literally get my feet wet with marine biology. Today, I am a second-year PhD student at the University of Central Florida. I study methods for metabarcoding plankton so that way we can better understand water quality and its effects on the ecosystem down here in Florida. I'm also a NOAA Margaret Davidson Fellow, and this allows me to work on applied research in one of the National Estuarine Research Reserves and learn how to relate research to management efforts. So, stop sharing here.
Wow, that's really cool. So if anyone has a question, you can go ahead and type it into the chat or unmute yourself. I'd like to begin with a question, which is how did you decide that you wanted to pursue a PhD?
I can go first. So I actually started here at UCF as a master's student. I just decided last semester to switch to the PhD track. And that was after I had gotten this Margaret Davidson Fellowship that provides funding for 2 years. I was just really enjoying my time in the lab. And this project seemed like it could extend a little longer. So I decided to, you know, stick around and see it through. I've been enjoying it here.
Actually,
So I guess,
I was going to say along the same lines, Graham, tell them what your original plans were. You never, this wasn't in the cards in the beginning, right?
yeah, you're correct. So I was a education major. I wanted to teach biology, and I'd heard through some of the peer mentors in the science and engineering residential college about the Beaver Island class and the ecology class. So I went up there to take it, and I was like, I don't really know about this. But you know, 3-week course. I heard it's fun. If I didn't like it, it was only 3 weeks, and that class was over. And I really fell in love with it up there. And some of the researchers that were up there were like, "Hey, we need help. Can we get some help from you guys?" So I turned into, you know, just going up there to get the class out of the way to going out every day during the summer with some of the graduate students to help them out with the research. And I really fell in love with that. And like Ashley, I joined Dr. Mahan's lab and started doing work with phylogenetics of sea spiders. and doing some barcoding. And I really fell in love with the work in the Antarctic. I just always dreamed about going to the Antarctic. And one of the researchers that Andy knows very well, Dr. Amy Moran here at the University of Hawaii, had an opening for a PhD student, and it kind of fit well. Sea spider world is a small world, so it kind of fit perfectly.
It's awesome. So what are you guys going to do? Do you know yet after you complete your PhDs?
Would love to get a job in academia, teach. I love the teaching. I mean, I'm teaching a class right now, an invertebrate zoology course, but I also love the research. So somewhere in academia, be like one of you would be great.
I want to go kind of a different route. I don't think I'm going to stay in academia. I am really interested in potentially working with as like a research manager position at one of these national estuarine reserves or something like with NOAA along those lines.
Can you guys describe your timeline? So when did you start at CMU, and then when you moved on, and then when? So for in both of your cases, when you anticipate being done with your PhD, and then what happens after your PhD? Say, like for Graham, if you want to go into academia, what happens after your PhD? And then same with you, Ashley. Do you have to go the postdoc route as well, or do you go right in? So if you guys wouldn't mind explaining that.
Yeah, so I started at CMU in 2014, so it took me 4 years to graduate. And then I took a gap year. So in that time, I had a lot of fun. I was a substitute teacher, a summer camp counselor at the zoo. I had a internship at the aquarium at Disney World, and I worked on my GRE and my grad application. So it was a really productive year for me. And then I started here at UCF in the fall of 2019. And I think it will take me about 5.5 years. So right now I'm looking at fall 2024, I think, to be done. I don't think I need to do a postdoc, but I have seen some like with the Smithsonian that are more kind of along the lines of what I'm interested in. So we'll see what that holds.
Right.
And I'm kind
So
of
then that
in this.
means.
Oh, sorry.
Oh wait, I'm sorry again. You said 2024 is when you think you might be done?
Yeah, I think so.
So 10 years from the start to where you might be looking at your first real job.
Yeah. Wow, it's kind of crazy when you put it that way. But, I've had so many awesome experiences. I think it's been well worth the time.
Sorry, Graham.
No, my apologies for interrupting you. But I came to CMU in the fall of 2015, graduated spring of 19. The first 2 years were in the education program, and then we switched to biology degree. As I said, graduated in 2019 spring, and then in the fall I came to the University of Hawaii, and yeah, that's where I'm at now. I'm on a second-year PhD student. Should be done in about 4 more years, I would say. So it'll be 2025, spring or fall of 2024, about that same time. And then most likely we'll go try to do a postdoc. I'm not quite thinking about that yet, but it's in the back of the mind. But do a postdoc somewhere, or if the opportunity arises somewhere to get some teaching experience, I know that would be super helpful. And from talking to my committee and stuff like that, they said that would also be a postdoc or some good teaching experience would really help me to get where to become a professor somewhere.
So just to kind of follow up on that, when I think Ashley, you talked about it a little bit. So you took a gap year to work on your grad application. So what all went into your grad application, and kind of when would you, if you were to tell a student, let's say an undergrad said, hey, I want to apply to a PhD, like how do you go about finding a place and working on that application?
Yeah, that's a great question, and actually, um, really hard to explain to someone who's not in the field because, for undergrad, you just put in your application and that's that. But for grad school, especially in biology, you have to find someone who has funding for you to do your research. So I started reaching out, oh, I guess I would have been summer 2018. So I was pretty ahead of the game, but about a year before I was really starting school, um, just kind of cold calling or cold emailing a bunch of different professors that I was interested in, looking at their website and their research. And then from there, I scheduled some phone calls and some Zoom interviews to see if I was a good fit. So you have to kind of take some time to find someone not only who has funding for you and wants you, but also somewhere you want to be too. So it was quite the process. I would definitely suggest starting early. And then once you find some good fits, then you can start working on that application process. And that's a little bit more what you'd be used to with an undergrad. You submit, a cover letter or a letter of intent, some letters of recommendation, and then I had to take the GRE. I know a lot of programs are beginning to phase that out, but I think at this point I would still recommend studying for and taking the GRE just to keep your options open.
Just to let anybody listening know, the GRE is the graduate record exam. So it's sort of like taking the SAT, but for graduate school. So did you just take the general or did you take the general and the subject?
I just took the general. I didn't run into any programs that required the subject. So yeah, that's another thing I would recommend is when you're looking at these different programs, also take a look at their admissions requirements, and you can start doing that, even at the beginning of your undergrad. If you think you might be interested in grad school, just start taking a look at what you might need in the future.
Graham, I had a question for you. Is one just sort of did you also take the GRE and then afterwards, whether or not you're a postdoc, you were talking about teaching. Are you thinking ultimately for academic going into like a community college or more of a teaching research one like CMU or more like an MSU high research area, or still not sure yet?
So I did, to answer your first question, I did take the GRE. Again, that's a very, it's a good thing to look when you're looking at applications to see if you need to take it or not. Like I said, most people, or a lot of colleges are going away from it, but it's a good thing to take. I think it just, like what Ashley was saying, it's a lot of like cold calls. They don't know you from anyone walking down the street when you first email them. So emailing them, talking to them. The GRE shows that you have some skills with your basic reading and writing. So it's a good thing to take and practice for. I would practice in advance for it. Give yourself plenty of time. With applying, I applied like what Ashley was saying, probably a year before. It's a good to have some time, and then it also allows you to visit the place because you're going to be spending, if you're doing your master's, a couple or 2, 3, maybe 4 years, your PhD, 5, 6 years. So it's a good time to give yourself some time to be able to go visit a place and really see where you're going to go. With the postdoc and the teaching, I guess this might be better answered by one of you, Stephen, but from what I've talked to some of my committee members, I would love to get into a place like CMU where it's a lot, where I can do a lot of teaching. I love the research, but the teaching is really what gets me up in the morning. So, but from what I've heard, a good way to get into that, it's somewhat difficult to just hop in there from a PhD or from getting done and graduating. So they've all recommended something like doing a teaching at a community college or doing a postdoc, one of the two, to get either that more research experience in those papers, which are I've always heard papers are currency, or that teaching experience, which is the other form of currency in this field.
Graham, you mentioned a couple times your committee members. So for those people that maybe don't know what that is, what is it? Who are they?
So it is a group of people who or at least in my case, I pick, who are there to support me through my PhD. They're there to critique things. They're going to be the ones, examining me, making sure I'm fulfilling all the requirements, making sure my thesis, which is my research that I'm doing, is something new and novel, and I'm not just copying and pasting, cookie cutting somebody else's stuff. So they're both my support, but also my challengers in the same sense in my eyes. That's how I view them. They're people that will help me when I need help, but they're also gonna give me a kick in the butt when I need it to start something new.
They're sort of adversarial advocates.
Perfect.
They will defend you to everybody else, but they're going to poke you directly.
And so I guess to explain that a little bit, so like my committee is 6 people, and so I have one of them is a statistician, because I'm going to need someone to really help me with stats, because I have a lot of stats heavy work. Someone to critique the stats. I have an oceanographer. I have a deep sea physiologist, so he works with in extreme environment. The Antarctic is a very extreme environment, so I thought that would be a perfect fit. And then the other ones are a mix between physiologists and invertebrate biologists.
6 is quite a. Just real quick, kind of. Did you discuss that with your main PI? I mean, just for people to know, you usually have a main PI who you directly work under, and the rest of your committee members are associated to bring more diversity to the group. Did you guys discuss having this wide range, or is there a minimum or maximum number required at your area? Where I was, you had to have at least 3, but you could have more if needed. And same thing to you too, Ashley.
So yeah, we have it's 5 outside committee members, meaning that they're not your PI, meaning like your direct overseer. So, and then it's anything. There's a few requirements, like they have to be at arm's length away, which is it's a whole nother discussion just to make sure. And then they have to be within the department, and then one member has to be outside the department, and that's someone who supports you in the eyes of the university and isn't like directly involved in the zoology department in my case.
Yeah, so I only have 3 committee members, and then once I pass my candidacy exam, I have to get a 4th, and that will be my external committee member. So.
I think that's very similar to the BCMB program at CMU as well.
Maybe
do you want to explain that? You just mentioned you're passing on to candidacy for those that aren't aware of what that is.
Yeah, so I think it varies a little bit between universities, but in general, once you're done with your coursework, like 2 to 3 years in, you're going to defend your proposal, which means you go in front of ours is like a public forum. So you make a public presentation and you talk about your research and you answer questions, and then everybody leaves and your committee kind of grills you a little bit further. So it's a little bit more like an exam where they ask you questions about your research and just make sure that you are fully confident to pursue this project further. And so there's like a little bit of terminology behind it. Right now I'm a PhD student, but then once I pass my exam, I will go up be a PhD candidate. I also do have to take another kind of exam. So we have a few options here. You can write out, your committee will send you questions and you have like a week to write essay-based responses to those questions, or you can do a literature review. So I think I'm going to be leaning towards the literature review in my case, but it's a little different between universities.
Ashley, just real quick, did you get to choose all your committee members? Like you sat down with your PI and discussed who would be appropriate and talk to them?
Yes, I did. Yep. And then the first people I asked were very willing and they had time to take me on their committee. So
when I did my PhD, it worked that way. I discussed it with my PI and he recommended some people in the department who would have some broad base but had some knowledge of what I was working on. Though it was a little different, and this may vary at different schools. When I was at University of Akron getting my master's, the way they did it was you had your PI and then you got to choose and ask somebody. And then the third member was literally name out of a fishbowl. They wanted a random person assigned who would not have any necessary connection do it. So they would literally, you went in and the graduate coordinator had everybody's name in a fishbowl. You reached in, pulled out a name, and like you're on. The first name I pulled out, I went because the graduate coordinator was on my committee, Monty Turner, and I pulled out and I said, Monty Turner, and he goes, that'd be cool. And he looked at me. I said, I'm already on your committee, and I'm like, yeah. And he goes, choose again. I go, of all the, there's 20 names in here. You pulled my name out. He goes, I took your PI name out, but geez. So that was just
That's
a
funny.
random thing. So I didn't know if anybody else had hit that or anybody heard that. But I don't know if they still do that, but they had like your third point person was a random choice. And you could have up to 4 on a committee if you needed to.
Little bit of a change of gear, but one of the things, Ashley, that you mentioned was you want to find a place that's right for you. So what are the kinds of research that a student could do to look at fit, and what are the kinds, for both of you, what are the kinds of questions that students may want to ask when they're interviewing or looking at prospective labs?
Yeah, so beyond just the normal, like what kind of research do you do questions, try and get a feel for their advising style. So I ask, like, are you more hands-on or hands-off? How much time do you expect me to be in the lab, or can I, work from home sometimes? Let's see. I'm drawing a bit of blank of what questions I asked professors, but I do know a big part of my decision was also talking to graduate students themselves. So usually the university will, if they don't bring you in to visit, then they will just give you contact information of other grad students. And I think it's really important to ask about grad student life and kind of the department culture. If you're someone like me, I really value connection in the department and being really involved. So that was important to me. And also talking about living and the expense of where you're living. That was something I didn't consider too seriously. I was just happy to have a funded position. But I moved to Orlando, which is far more expensive than Mount Pleasant. So that's just something to consider as well, is the cost of living and if you're going to enjoy living there as well.
What about
So,
you,
Graham,
Graham?
I imagine cost of living is somewhat of a concern in Hawaii.
Yeah, that is something that every day I still ask myself what the heck's going on here with the prices of things. But yeah, I mean it's to go back to what you originally asked, you want to find a place that feels like home, and talk to the grad students, talk to the former grad students. I would advise that as well, because they've gone through the whole process, and I guess I mean this in the best way possible. They are not tied to that PI as in like they need to graduate anymore, so they might give some more honest feedback on things. Yeah, I mean, it's you want to find a place to live, the cost of living, talk to the grad students, because sometimes, the professors and the PIs might not know exactly what it's like to live on that graduate student stipend, but you can make by. I mean, even here, the stipend's not the greatest, but I love what I do, so it's totally worth it. And the views here, I don't have to worry about those. What is it, like 30 degrees back home right now? I heard y'all were supposed to get snow like yesterday or something like that.
Yeah, I think it's funny that we both fled south.
Oh yeah.
Here's another question for both of you, because this really varies by the school and institution you're at. As part of being a student there, do you have health benefits at all? Because when I was at Akron as a grad student, they didn't. They had a clinic. And when I was at Rutgers, we had full health benefits. We had the same health benefits as the faculty. So that was great. So I didn't know if you guys had that, because that's a consideration, just like a regular job. What's your salary? What's your cost of living? Are there health benefits? And also, housing, things like this. If you're single, if you're married, you have children, I mean, whatever you can tell me about those areas. I mean, I never thought too much about healthcare when I was your age doing it. I'm like, I'm fine. I don't care.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't think too much about it. Sorry.
Oh, you're good. You're good.
I didn't think too much about it either because I was still on my dad's health insurance, but I'm getting the boot in about a year here. Yes, UCF does provide health insurance for students. I've heard it's good. You know, some of the graduate students here have had children with the insurance and had most of their things covered. The only thing that it doesn't include is dental and vision, which is unfortunate. So yeah, those are things that are definitely important to consider. A lot of people here do live with roommates. I live with a significant other. So yeah, usually you can't really afford to live on your own around here. It's just important things to consider that I feel like when I was kind of young and fresh-faced coming out of undergrad, I thought that, you know, everything would be fine. But, you know, now that I'm starting to get a little bit older and settled in, those are things that I wish I had gone back and kind of thought more critically about.
But yeah, the healthcare, we have healthcare here. Again, I have another year and a half till I get the boot from my parents' healthcare. So, but they do have healthcare here. I'm not 100% sure what it all entails, but there are quite a few students that are on it. Like what Ashley was just saying, there's quite a few older students that have families and have kids that are on it. Yeah, that's with the roommates thing. One thing I would urge all of you is if you do go into a PhD or master's and you're moving off somewhere completely new, there are going to be quite a few other new students who are moving there from all over parts of this world. So send out an email. Send out an email to the department. They can usually send it out to everyone saying, "Hey, I'm looking for a roommate." That's what I did. And I was like, I'm moving to Hawaii and I'm going to stay on a grad student's couch for a week until I find an apartment. Is anybody willing to look for an apartment? And, you know, it helps to be able to move in my eyes, it helps to be able to move in to someone who's also in graduate school, because they're kind of going through the same rigors that you are. And they understand, you know, when you're like, I need to be quiet. I'm writing for the next week and a half. Can you please, I'm going to just be silent. And that's a good thing to look into, is like other graduate students that need housing.
Hey, so can you, both of you, how many choices did you have? How many schools did you apply to? And then how many options did you have before you took the one that you settled on or chose to go to?
I guess Ashley, you can go first.
I applied to 4 schools. Um, I don't know if this is sort of a unique situation or what happened, but actually, I did not hear back from 2 of the schools I applied to. I paid my application fee, and they just never gave me a decision, which I think was pretty unfortunate. But UCF was my top choice. So as soon as I heard back from them, I withdrew my 4th application. So yeah, really, it just worked out that I got into my top choice.
And you were applying, this was for master's programs at first, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Graham?
Okay, so I applied to 4 places. One which Ashley just explained. I did not. I was told to apply and pay the application fee, and then they would chat, and it never came. So I was a little disappointed with that one. But the other 3, I was accepted to 2 of. Oh, I was accepted to 3 of them really, but the funding fell through on one of them. They were hoping on an NSF grant, didn't go through. So I had a decision between 2 universities, and when Dr. Moran called, I was actually at a Wings game, and she called and said, "Hey, I just got an Antarctic grant," and I said, "You got me." So that was all I needed to hear. That's a big thing, you know. Ashley's mentioned it a few times. A fully funded with research. That's extremely helpful to get. We call them RA-ships here, where you know you're able to not have to teach. You're able to really just do your work, and that's a huge thing to look into. Ask if they have TA, if you're going to be on a TA ship, meaning are you going to be teaching, teaching half the time and then doing your research in the free time, or an RA ship where you can just really dive into that research. So that was one of the big deciding factors for me when they called and said, I've got a an Antarctic grant, and I was like, I've wanted to go here since joining Andy's lab, and I was on a plane to Hawaii that next week to go visit. So
That's an it's really exciting to hear back about when you get to pick your labs and you're looking at all the cool research and what you could envision yourself doing. And when I'm hearing you guys talk, I'm remembering how excited I was. I think it's a good time to mention for people that may be viewing later that if you're in the maybe the cell or molecular field of biology, as opposed to applying to individual labs, most institutions have what's called an umbrella program, and you just put your application in. So you have your personal statement and all your application materials, and then they'll look at those. And then if they like your application materials, they'll invite you out to an interview. And then you'll meet with different faculty. And then you can ask, what's your funding situation? And ask all those questions that people that Ashley and Graham brought up. So it's just a little bit different. I think it's probably a little bit easier because you don't have to do all the cold calls. um, but going back to those materials, so who helped you? Did someone help you kind of write those emails? Or did you how did you do a lot of sleuthing online to figure out like if you had any network connections or any tips, right, to get into a place that's your number one choice?
so I met two of the researchers that I was applying to their labs. I took a summer class at University of Washington's Friday Harbor Labs. Um, it's a great place if you want to go take some invertebrate classes, learn about the invertebrates on the West Coast. And one of the professors there was actually one of the people that I applied to. And the other ones were people that Dr. Mahan knew, one of which he did a postdoc with. Um, the Antarctic biologist is a small field. So like one of the places I applied to, he did his PhD under the other guy. Andy did his PhD or did a master's, not a master's. I'm stumbling over my words. A postdoc under one of the guys. But Andy really helped me a lot. His wife Heidi, who also works at Central, so go look her up in the engineering department. She helped me out a ton. But it's word of mouth, really meeting people. If you do present at conferences, I present at the Society for Integrative and Comparative Biology conference. I met a ton of them there. It's a great place just to, meet people at conferences that, quick and easy chats about your research. But that's how I ended up meeting all these people. Instead of having to do a lot of it, it still kind of was a cold call on a couple of them because Andy hadn't talked to them in a few years or in quite a bit. And a couple of them were cold calls, but.
Yeah, I kind of did it on my own. I feel like I had heard about this concept of having to reach out to different professors from like different panels like this at CMU. I was involved in the trying to get that Tri Beta Biology Honor Society off the ground, and it was small, but we did have some grad students come in and talk to us and tell us about this, which was super helpful. I Googled, there's one website, I think, I'll send it to you guys if you want to attach it, that tells you how to format one of these cold call emails. That was super, super helpful to me. And then as far as finding professors, I think it was just a lot of Google, also looking up papers, searching up some keywords of the research I was interested in and looking at those authors. I was able to narrow down my schools that I was looking at a little bit because I was looking for a funded master's position in marine science, which there are far fewer than there are for PhDs. But yeah, it just kind of worked out that I sent out a bunch of emails, talked to a lot of different people, and kind of found my good fit.
And if I may, one thing that I would add is when you are doing these emails, try your best to be genuine with it. I know some people send out a bunch of emails, but the worst thing you can do is to send out a carbon copy thing and accidentally puts "Dear Eric" when I'm sending it to Dr. Colores, like Greg, and it happens when sometimes you send out those cookie cutter emails. So really try to, like what Ashley was just saying, read some papers, get some background on what the person's doing, so you have something to talk about, and then those emails can really just fill themselves in once you know what they're doing, where they're, where they're at. So I would urge against, copy and paste shooting emails to a whole university, because sometimes gets around that, that's just a copy cutter email.
I think that's great advice. But also to, if you're talking to someone about their own research and they're experts on their own research, you want to make sure that you're paraphrasing what you've read from their papers or from their website. And it's always good to get a second, one of your faculty advisors to take a peek at it and maybe help you change a word or two, just so that it's completely clear, right? So we're always around to help out students with those things.
Yeah, you can come up with a little bit of a form, but not directly, just, the general skeleton of like how you introduce, and this is why I want to work with you, and I've read your papers, and make sure you read the papers. Say, I've read these papers, and this is why I want to work with you, and I work with so and so, and I work on this, and I read your paper as part of my research, and I would like to continue my work with you, and that kind of shows a connection. So those kind of forms of it, yeah, you have to pretty much write each one out, because you don't want to put it in and say, I loved your paper on, you send the paper to Greg and said, I loved your paper on euglenoids. And he's like, I don't work on euglenoids. So you want to make sure that you kind of write them and just have a general form. Make sure you hit those points. And yeah, have your PI or whoever your advisor is read through them, just not only for grammar, things like that, but just what kinds of things are you going to say, and is it going to flow through that it's clear what's going on? Because we get a lot of emails. Like I get emails of, hi, I would like to come and work on your lab. I think it would be a good fit for your lab. I've worked on this. I'm like, that has nothing to do with whatever I'm working on. I don't know how you even found me based on what you're working on.
Yeah, and like what Ashley and I both said, we took a lot of time, like a year before we were thinking about starting, to reach out and contact these people. And this is from what I've noticed, and it's took me a little bit to understand this, but it's a lot of time, not only money, but like a time investment that these PIs, these professors, are putting into students. So they really want to make sure someone's a fit, because let's say I back out after I join, they potentially lost a whole 6 years with somebody that they didn't take because they took me. So if they're going to ask you some tough questions, they're going to make sure to take your time to really get to know them, because it is a big time and money investment that goes in both the university, your eyes, and that PI's eyes. So take your time, really take some care when you're trying to reach out to them and converse with them. And that will really make a big difference. To show that you care, I guess, is one of the biggest things.
So I'm going to switch gears a little bit and kind of end with maybe one more question, which is, graduate school can be really challenging sometimes. So like, what is your advice to future graduate students for how to deal with those challenges? Or any career, really, right?
I think that building a good support group is great. So here at UCF, we have a biology grad student association that's pretty tight knit, where we can all kind of, vent to each other, and also taking advantage of mental health resources. I think that it's really important to kind of end the stigma around mental health, and everyone struggles at some time. So there's no shame in reaching out and taking advantage of those resources that especially colleges have for their students.
Yeah, I mean, if I can echo that, that stigma there. I mean, it is, you don't need to work yourself to death while you're in grad school. That's not the point. Enjoy what you're doing. build yourself a support network. I had, Brooke's here. Hopefully she's here listening. But I had Brooke all through undergrad. I was a peer mentor for her, and she was a super big help. And I was looking for that when I looked for a graduate program. I was looking for, are the people welcoming when I walk in here? There certainly were places that I interviewed at that I did not feel super comfortable in. That's not a good place to start out at. But build yourself a support network. Find people who help you out. And in today's age, where we're on computers a lot and we're on Zoom, really set yourself some hours. I would say, when we initially started everything online, I was, people are sending me emails at like midnight and like, hey, can I get this? And it's like, oh, we'll wait till the morning to get back with that, just because. Set yourself some hours, have some free time. That's one of the things here in Hawaii. They say things take a little bit longer here because it's a little bit more laid back. But yeah, I would just take care of your mental health when you're in graduate school. Take some time to get to know the place that you're in, build some connections. For me, go visit, go around Hawaii. I'd hate to be here and strictly be in this lab the whole time.
Did you, so did you go, Graham, did you go to the Arctic as an undergrad or as a grad student?
As a graduate student, my first year in I had pictures to share if you don't mind if I throw them up real quick.
So wait, this is from your cruise, right?
Yeah, so I just have, or no, not a cruise. So Andy went on a cruise. Is it working with sharing?
Uh-huh.
So this is a picture of me the first day in the Antarctic. It's about -40. It was pretty darn cold. Stepping off the plane. I like the cold, but when you spend a couple of months in Hawaii first, you get used to that warm. But this is right on the ice out in front of McMurdo Station. And we got some research that I did in Friday Harbor Labs in some mud flats, and then the famous the boathouse at Beaver Island. But sorry, I meant to show these at the beginning, but I forgot. But yeah.
So you didn't go on a sampling cruise then? You went on.
No,
you just went right to McMurdo.
Right to McMurdo. Yep.
Did you work there? Okay.
And then 6 or 5.5 months there, I should say.
Wow. And what did you do there?
So how do I? So there is a huge lab. I mean, it's built down there as a science complex. So there's like 1,200 people down there, and their main goal is to keep the base running and to support the science. So what we did is we study sea spiders, pycnogonids, and mainly nudibranchs, because those are the two easiest things to get to. But any invertebrate really, and what we wanted to look at was the effects that temperature play on their development. So the Antarctic only varies by roughly a degree where we're at, a degree Celsius every year throughout the whole year. So most of these organisms, when they're developing at -1.8 degrees Celsius, which is about 28 degrees Fahrenheit for almost the whole year. And there's maybe a month or two that they get a degree or so warmer. And so as the ocean temperatures warm, one would expect things that spend their whole life in the freezing cold are not going to be able to deal with warm temperatures. Like if you took someone in my circumstance from Hawaii here and dropped them in Michigan in December, they're not going to do well because they're used to that warm temperature. And vice versa, if you took someone from, Michigan in December and dropped them in Hawaii, they're going to be like, oh my gosh, it's 70 degrees. It's too hot for me right now. I need to acclimate. Well, when you've been evolving for millions of years at that -1.8, that's the concern, is how will these organisms adapt to that? So we rose sea spiders and nudibranchs at different temperatures to really see how their metabolic rate, their developmental rate, and their respiration was affected. Sorry, that was a long, long explanation, but still working on my elevator speech for that. But
similarly, Ashley, what did you do at Disney World?
Yeah, so I was an aquatic research professional intern. So I kind of supported all of the aquarium research that they were doing there. They do research to benefit the lives of the animals, a lot of animal welfare studies, as well as I personally did not get to do any genomic research, but they are involved in some partnerships to work on conservation, genomics, and breeding programs. So I assisted some dolphin cognition experiments. I did my own kind of mini project looking at dolphin vocalizations during some of their research sessions. And we also just did some monitoring of the animals in the main habitat, going down and watching and seeing, how many times do they swim in this direction and that direction, and just to try to get a good feel of how the animals are doing in their environment and how we can make their lives better.
So no costume wearing.
Actually, I did. They call all of our uniforms costumes. So I
Okay.
did technically have a nice, blue polo costume, but no Mickey Mouse for me.
I think people would be surprised how much research they actually do at Disney World. I know they do some, like when we were there, like soil work, like agricultural work, and I frequently, as one of the pre-vet advisors, we get calls from Disney World for reproductive, to advertise to students. They have reproductive interns that they want because of the captive breeding program for many of the endangered animals they have, that they really study them. And so yeah, there's that kind of opened my eyes to the amount of research they actually do there.
Yeah, I'm very passionate about applied research and ways we can combine, science and communication and conservation and really bridge those gaps.
Well, on behalf of the Student Relations Committee, thank you for your time and coming back and telling us about, your amazing projects and how you got into your PhD. I think this will be really valuable for a lot of students. So thank you very much for your time. And it is really fun to hear about all the really cool stuff CMU students go on to do. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much. So.